Hello and welcome to Racing Incident, a Formula One and sometimes other motorsport podcast in an American accent. I'm Anna, and today I actually have with me someone who doesn't have an American accent. So I'm going against the whole theme of the podcast here, but I am very, very happy to welcome someone who I've characterized him already online as a Team LH bad boy, which I think he kind of is a bit. Last week we had Rashi on, who we consider a Team LH celebrity, and now we have someone who's more controversial, perhaps, among the Team LH fandom, and that is someone who most of you will know him as his Twitter username, which is Thanos with some numbers on it as well. But
676.
there we go. But his name actually is Neil. So Neil, welcome to the show.
Hi, Anna. Thank you, and thank you for
Hi.
having me on. And thanks for the introduction. The Twitter bad boy, Twitter. I don't. I probably. Actually, I'll take it. I'll take it. I take it. I don't mind. I'll
Yeah.
wear it with pride. I tend to rub people the wrong way, but I do that. I enjoy doing that actually.
I had a
Kind of fun.
feeling. I had a feeling.
It's kind of
It's
fun.
said
Yeah.
with love. It's said with love.
Yes. Yes.
Um, so I wanted to talk to you mainly because you're obviously, as I said, you're out there a lot in terms of on social media and talking to other fans and etc. And sometimes, even though we're both kind of, Team LH type people, sometimes we don't agree. And I thought it would be interesting to talk about some of those things too. But I guess the first thing is that I do like to usually ask people is, kind of for a lot of people maybe a boring question, but how did you first get into motorsport? Do you only watch F1 or do you watch other motorsports? What's your whole story?
Well, well, my origin story is, I got involved into Formula One is because of my mum, actually. She was the biggest Mika Hakkinen fan back in the day. And when I moved to the UK, I don't know, it was just one Sunday afternoon, we were indoors and going through the channels. And I so happened to popped on to ITV. It was ITV. I can't remember what race it was. And my mom was like, "Oh, leave it there. I want to watch this because Mika Hakkinen." And I was like, "What's this?" And she's like, "Explain it to me." And I mean, that's when the love affair with the sport started, and I've been a fan since then.
How old were you at the time?
Oh no, that means I'm gonna give my age away. I was 10 years old.
Okay,
I
okay.
was 10. Nah, no, I wasn't 10 years old, but yeah, I wasn't a teenager. Put it that. Well, actually, I was a teenager. Yeah, I was a teenager at that time, but
Okay, there you
yeah,
go.
that was when the love affair started with it, and I've been a fan ever since. I've been, McLaren, Mika, Mika was my first, driver that I truly followed. When he left, I just watched because I still enjoy the sport, but at the same time, I was keeping up with other series. I, that name popped up in the junior categories in the UK, Formula Renault, all of these Euro F3 series, Lewis Hamilton name pops up. You didn't really get to see all the races, but occasionally you'd see them. I can't remember, there was a channel that you could see them on occasionally. So, and you'd have to buy. And at that point, we didn't have social media or the internet or anything like that where we could get that information. So you had to go down to the corner store I think it was every Monday to buy the Autosport magazine to, read up
Wow.
on all of the things that went on over the weekend and so on. So I started with that, and I'm a big motorsports fan. Actually, I just like sports in general, but it depends on the sport. I'm not too. I still I still don't. People say darts is a sport. I still don't agree with that because my view of sports is if it can't seriously injure you or if you can't die from it, it's not really a sport, is it? It's just I know it's a bit
Interesting.
I
Interesting.
know it's kind of cruel way of looking at it, but so I
Hmm.
like I'm a big sports guy. I'm always watching sports. It's even now where you're recording this, I've got in the background. I've got the IPL T20 cricket going on in the background. So, so that's me. And in terms of, I don't just watch Formula One. I watch. I like V8 supercars, but I can't get that because I don't have the channels for it.
Mhm.
I watch BTCC. I'm into
Mhm.
MotoGP. I watch all the MotoGP categories, British Superbikes, World Superbikes. I get
Mhm.
the odd, if AMA is on, that's the American Superbikes Championship. If that's on, I'll catch a bit of that. So if it's sports and I like it, I'll watch it. So just think
Gotcha. That is a
that's
lot
mine.
of sports. That is a whole
Yes,
lot of sports for sure.
yes, it
Now,
is.
let me say counterpoint on the darts thing. Now, what if I'm playing darts and I throw a dart and someone walks in front of the dartboard and the dart goes right in their eye? Now, that's someone getting hurt. What do you think?
Well, I don't know, but I don't. Then that person isn't actually playing. They're just an innocent bystander. I'm more like if
True.
you as the athlete or the participant don't doesn't get hurt, can't get hurt in that manner, then it's not really because all you're doing is just throwing the thing at a
Yeah,
small board
yeah.
and counting down numbers, and it's like, what where's
I'm not
the
saying I think it's a sport.
yeah,
I don't really either, but
So I
I'm
question
just
it.
playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, I question people who says arts is a sport. I just don't see it as a sport as well
I don't know.
as
I
chess.
could see I could see that point of view, I guess, because I think of it as like something that requires some kind of either physical, well, I guess physical skill in this case, because
Really?
you do have to throw, you're throwing the dart and you have to be accurate, and not everyone can do that, and probably people that are really good at it, can do it better than someone who
Yeah, true,
doesn't have
but
a lot of experience. Yeah.
true, but I'll argue with them forever that darts is not a sport. Sorry,
Okay,
I'm
okay.
not gonna,
Fair,
not gonna be like
fair.
that. Yeah.
That's fair enough. So you've been a fan for a long time as compared to
Yep.
someone like me, and you've seen a lot more than I have. Um, what do you what do you think keeps you being a fan of, I don't want to say sport necessarily, because while we're having this discussion about whether it's a sport or not, I'm reminded of, like, I recently did a Twitter space where I asked a Formula One engineer friend of mine questions that people submitted, and then I shared the answers to the
Hmm.
questions. And somebody did ask something about what's, like, they said, I forget what the question was, but it was like, where they called F1 a sport, and my engineer friend was like, "It's not a sport; it's an entertainment package."
Oh
And
God.
I think about that a lot. And obviously, in especially many events of recent years. But what keeps you engaged in it? All these years.
I s- mainly if we're looking at Formula One, it's the speed, it's the adrenaline of it, it's the skill that's required to do what these guys do because it's not any normal human being can just the idea that someone can say and say, oh yeah, I can do this, I can do that. It's not
Yeah.
really, no, you can't, because case in point, a couple years ago I was at a fun fair and they had a Formula One simulator there, simulator at the track.
Cool.
So I went in. It's like you have a lot of people in. So I went in, and it was a lap of Silverstone driven
Hmm.
by Michael Schumacher. I think it was. I can't remember if it was in the Benetton or it was the '96 Ferrari. And let's just say one when that ride was over and I stepped out, I felt like I was gonna throw up, and my legs were weak. And I'm thinking, there's absolutely no way you can just look at these guys and think, yeah, what they're doing isn't, it's absolute, it's brutal on the
Yeah.
body. It
Hmm.
takes a lot of, training and if so you look at them as superhumans because what they're doing
Hmm.
defy, in some ways should defy the laws of physics, but
Hmm.
they are able to do it. So I enjoy the speed, the adrenaline. It's just the, the competition of it. I'm a sort of
Hmm.
person, I like sports where there's competition. I like that competing element of sports. That's what interests me more than anything else. Because then you get to see who is the best of the best going up
Mhm.
against each other. So to answer the question, it's just the adrenaline of it, the excitement. That's what keeps me going. But I think it's in with Formula One. I'm not waiting on I'm just kind of like waiting for Lewis to retire so I can go bye, and I'm done because like your engineer friend said, it's an entertainment package, and I think that's what they're trying
Mhm.
to market Formula One as now, as an entertainment
Mhm.
package rather than a sport. And I've always said entertainment is a byproduct of sport. It's not the first point of, it's not the first, should be the first focus of the sport about
Mhm. Mhm.
entertainment. Is you get entertainment from the competition. If you want to pack something that's 100% geared towards entertainment, go watch WWE, go watch wrestling because that's choreographed, that's pre-written scripts that they're working to. Sports should not be about that. Sports
Mhm.
should be
Yeah.
about competing and the best person wins. I don't care if you feel like you know you don't have the same. That's the name of the game. No, you're not. It's never going to be a level playing field where everyone has
Mhm.
the exact same resources, funding, and so on to compete. But
Mhm.
you get that from a lesser. It's seeing the underdogs succeed against the big dogs in sport. Like case in
Mhm.
point, a couple of years ago, I can't remember what year it was. Leicester City, I believe they were 5,000 to 1 to win the Premier League. And they won the Premier League. And you look at Leicester City as a club and you're like, how did you beat the likes of a Liverpool, a Chelsea, a Arsenal, a Man City, a Man United? These are clubs that has infinitely more financial resources. They can attract the bigger name players. But this
Mhm.
team of players that were just came together as a unit, played as a team, defied the odds over a 38 game season and won the league.
Yeah.
That's what I like about sport. It's that competition element of it. And if I no longer feel like that's there, I lose interest in it because it just feels like it's just orchestrated, not a package, as
So
your
is
friend
that
said.
is that how you're starting to feel then about Formula One? You kind of alluded to that, saying that
Y-
they're going very much for the entertainment aspect,
Yeah, I think
and maybe less.
I think after what happened in Abu Dhabi, I kind of, you know, like, okay, what's going on? And the constant talk from those within the sport, people who run the sport, I mean, we want to entertain, we want to do this, we want, and
Mhm.
all the gimmicks that they're coming in with to try and raise the entertainment factor of it. I'm like, I don't, I don't know. I'm more of in some ways, a traditionalist. So I'd like it
Right.
to remain um, true to its core. We
Mhm.
don't need to be doing all of these talking about sprint races and so forth. I think if the car,
Oh yeah, are you
if
not a fan then of the sprint races?
not really, because it doesn't really offer much. It's basically the full race at a shorter distance. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It's still gonna be the top dogs. If the big teams qualify at the front, it's more likely they're gonna win the race
Mhm.
and get
What do you think
occupy
about
the
the changes that they're proposing to the sprint weekend format where they're going to have I think they might even already be doing this in Baku. I can't remember, but where they're going to have qualifying will set the grid for the race, and the
Mhm.
sprint race is going to be like a separate thing, and you do a kind of a quick brief qualifying for that to set the grid for that, and then you get some, I forget what the point totals are that they'll give out for the
See,
sprint. So their hope in making those in doing that is they're hoping that, because a lot of people of course have had the same reaction as you being like, what's the point of this? The people aren't going to want to risk their grid positions for the race on Sunday where you get the big points,
Hmm.
and because something could happen to you in the sprint and suddenly you're, way at the back. So now they're trying to eliminate that aspect of it by making the sprint a standalone thing. So your qualifying on Friday will still determine your grid position for the race, and the sprint will be its own thing. So they're hoping, I guess, the idea being that maybe people will take risks in the sprint and not and not just kind of drive around behind each other like they have in a lot of the sprints that we've had so far. Do you think that could be more interesting or no?
Doesn't really change much, does it? Because if the qualifying on Friday sets the grid for Sunday, and then
Hmm.
you go into and then you have to do another qualifying for the sprint race, so you're doing two qualifying to set two grids. What's the point of
Hmm.
doing that? It doesn't, because what the issue that they originally the issue that I had with it last year was you had qualifying, then you go into the sprint race, and the sprint race results sets the grid for Sunday.
Hmm.
Was that really the right way to go about it? I'm not sure, because in World Superbikes, I've been doing this for years, where they have three race formats on the weekend. They have race one, they have they call it sprint qualifying, in which is a second race, and the third race, which is the main race. Now, race you do qualifying on Friday, Saturday, you go into race one, and then you go and then you finish race one. So race two, which is a sprint qualifying, you start where you qualified in the in the first race, in original qualifying. Where you finish in the sprint qualifying is where you start the main race, which I
Hmm.
believe that's what Formula One did
Yeah,
last year.
that's what it
Yeah,
was. That's what it was so far.
but
Yeah.
but the thing is, it doesn't add anything extra to the weekend. It doesn't offer anything else, because if you get away, m- it's more likely that where the positions will change is probably lower down the grid. But you
Hmm.
expect the top teams to basically get away into formation and more likely finish where they start. So does it really offer anything new, anything different? Because the drivers, like you said, they're not going to. You still have the issue with cars can't basically struggling to pass each other.
Hmm.
So if you're going to do it, why not do it in a sense whereby you have special tires just for sprint qualifying,
Hmm.
where these
That
tires
could be interesting.
where you don't use these ties throughout the entire weekend up until you get to
Hmm.
once the sprint race starts. That's the first time you're going to use
Hmm.
these ties, so you have no information whatsoever. You don't know
Hmm.
how balanced your car is going to be. You don't know how high the
Hmm.
degradation rate is going to be on these tires. You never use them, so then that throws in a bit of an unknown for the teams, because
Hmm.
going into the sprint, these they pretty much they do one practice session. They pretty much can get a good understanding of what the tires are doing. The only problem
Right.
is
And
where
I
they
mean,
fall.
I think that's also the thinking Formula One management, of course, as they've said, is that, practices are not as interesting for people, whether they're at the track or watching at home, and that people would rather see, something that has some meaning, even if it's not a lot of points, and even if it's not,
Mm,
that something that is a race. Do you think, I mean, I'll be honest, I guess it is more interesting for me to see, something that's a race rather than a practice, which is where we often get, the terrible commentary
okay, but
because they have nothing interesting to say.
true. But then here's the thing: you remove qualifying, you removed all the practice sessions, and you shorten the race weekend from 3 days to say 2 days, Saturday, Sunday. What do you do on a Friday? You have to remember, all of these promoters, they're in it, they're trying to make their money back. So if you
Hmm.
reduce what you present on a Friday, that's less people coming through the turnstile on a
No, but
Friday.
they'd still have regular qualifying on Friday under this proposal of the
so
new
so
format.
on Friday you just have qualifying, and then what,
No, I think you would have one practice session and then qualifying
and one
is
practice and
what
then
is how.
qualifying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so is it really any different to what we have now, with the exception of, rather than qualifying being on Saturday, it's going to be on a Friday. It's pretty much the same thing.
Right.
You just moving one thing from a later date to an earlier date. That's all you're doing
Yeah.
because it's similar with a sprint weekend. You have practice one, then qualifying, and then Saturday morning you have what's it practice three, then you have the sprint race, and then on Sunday you have the main race. So is it really anything different? You just moved one, you just switched chairs. That's all you've done.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
think
I mean, I
if
guess I maybe it's because I'm not a longtime fan like the way
yeah,
you are that
uh,
I'm probably more open to changes as a means of, like let's see, you know what I mean? Like maybe it'll work out, maybe it won't. Like there have been, they're still, monkeying with the format. They haven't made any really final decisions on what it's going to be. And then I heard somebody else actually talking about an interesting idea of what if we had, instead of, I mean, presumably they're picking which tracks are going to be sprint weekends with some kind of, with some kind of thinking of maybe this track would be better to have a sprint at than another. I hope it's not just like random.
but I
but,
don't
uh, but,
go,
what some
go on.
people are saying is that, like, what if you had specific formats for specific tracks, let's say every year. So a lot of people, of course, not that interested in the race at Monaco because of the current situation with the cars being large and it's difficult to pass and it's so narrow, and that typically, barring any weird things like the weather last season,
Yeah,
or Ferrari being Ferrari, there's not much interest in that race. So what if, for tracks like that where it's difficult to pass and there's, often just a train of cars, that maybe for those tracks there it makes it more interesting, for the viewer to have something extra that's going to be, that's going to have, some possible jeopardy or change in positions or etc.
but here's the question: which track right now do we have that's actually good for any form of racing?
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean,
That's the next question. We don't
yeah.
the cars the the cars have outgrown the tracks. They're too big. So
Hmm.
it's the idea of racing and where it's just the cars aren't made for the tracks anymore. The tracks have
Hmm.
gotten you say the cars have got the tracks have somewhat gotten smaller if you look at it based on the size of the car. So I don't see any track on the grid that you could say actually is good for sprint racing. You think somewhere like Silverstone would be good for sprint racing, but I don't think it is. I think Silverstone has become somewhat of a difficult track nowadays, simply because of how quick the cars have gotten. There's not many braking zones at Silverstone, so the opportunity to pass isn't that great. So it's a high speed circuit. You look at somewhere like Monza. I mean, where can you really pass in Monza? I think you have one major braking zone in Monza, and that's going into turn one. But apart from that, it's still it's like a train. Monza, that you used to have the Truly train. You probably call Monza the Monza train now when you look at it. But, so there isn't really any track that you can specifically look at and say, okay, this track would be good to have a sprint race because really and truly, Baku is not a track to have a sprint race. I'm sorry. I don't think Baku is a good track to have a sprint race. It just has one long straight and that's it. So
Yeah.
you're gonna hope that all the excitement happens on that one straight. And who's gonna pass the Red Bull? Nobody. So
Well, there's
where we
other
gonna
cars that might pass
yeah,
people.
yeah, true, but I mean, you want to see someone passing the Red Bulls. You don't want to see action just
Well, I don't think
one
we're
half
gonna
of
see that this season necessarily.
yeah, true. We probably yeah,
That's a
probably won't
separate
even see
matter.
it next year either. But we can
Right.
only hope. But I think if they want it to work, they have to throw an unknown factor into it, and which is where my suggestion. Oh, sorry,
Sprinklers on the track.
I've got the blinds in my window open, so the sun's coming up and
No
down.
worries. No
Yeah,
worries.
and
Yes.
that's where I suggest.
Sprinklers on the track. Remember that
Oh,
idea?
Bernie's no infamous idea. Yeah, no, that's not gonna work. I think you just
No,
have
of course
one
not, but
specific
yeah.
if you have a tire that no one knows about, they have no data whatsoever. They can't do any setup work
Mhm.
on it. Sprint race time, we give you one set of the tires. That's what you have to go do the laps, and you're gonna have to make it work. and then
I'd be
you
up
know
for
then
that.
and then
I'd be up for it.
that's a bit of unknown. So teams, how teams go about managing that might work, but given the current format, it's pretty much status quo because the guys, they're so good. Engineers are so good that one practice session could be enough to get the car set up well
Right.
enough.
Right.
Granted, it doesn't always work. Case in points, Brazil last year with Red Bull because they messed up
Yeah.
this the setup because they only had one practice session. But even so, the that only basically affected them. It didn't really affect anybody else. So you have to put something
Yeah.
there that you know because you're not going to get the excitement you want naturally. And if you're going to create, you want to create a
Right.
product, an artificial way of excitement, then I think that's how you go about it. Just okay, here's your mystery box, go race it and see what happens. But
I
right
like that.
now,
I like that.
right
Yeah,
now,
it's a
I
tough
don't
one.
know.
It's a tough one for sure
Yeah.
because like I've seen, some and the drivers aren't in full agreement on it either. As we all know, Max famously hates the sprints. So that's probably the one thing you and Max are in agreement about
Oh God.
in life in general.
I feel,
Sorry, but
yeah, I feel life
I
is
got
coming to an
that's
end.
yeah. That's something you guys agree on. He has said. I mean, he's even. I'm sure you've seen. He said that like if F1 keeps doing things like this, then I'm not going to be here that much
Okay,
longer.
well,
So
I
there's
agree.
there's
I agree with
a
all the changes they're making. And I hope they speed it up.
there you
Speed
go.
up.
There you go. See,
Speed up.
see.
Yeah.
I was like, is that a promise, Max? Like,
Yeah. I hope it is.
um, well, one can only hope. But so he's not into them. Alex Albon recently said something about, I think, which is a valid point, that it's not something that can benefit really teams at the back that much or towards the back like him. It can only probably cause them problems potentially, because if you think about it, especially with the cost cap and teams that are lower resourced, even under the cost cap, some of course teams are right at the cost cap, some are not. That if you're, and especially if you're a team that's lower down the order and you're starting out in the middle of the pack or towards the, you're more likely to get into some kind of a situation in a
Hmm.
sprint race or any other thing, and then you're going to potentially have spent a lot of money on an accident or something, in that
Yeah,
situation, and there's not much reward in it for you.
but I believe there's something in the regulation that says if there's any form of accident, teams are compensated a certain
Yeah,
amount.
I
I
did. They
think.
did. They did make some changes on that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because the teams, of course, that was one of their main problems when they first wanted to introduce the sprint races. Was they were even supposed to have the first time they did them, it was 3 sprint races only during the whole season, and then the next season they wanted to do 6, and the
Mm.
teams were like, no, 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 no,
Not
we
if
can't unless.
unless you're gonna pay us more for in case of
Right, right.
damage.
Which is valid, which is
Yeah.
valid. I do think sometimes that the teams have a little too much power in the whole kind of, again, I don't know what to call it, if not a sport. We'll just call it a sport, just, because uh, even if it's not really 100% a sport. Because I mean, I do think on this point it is actually also interesting to think about it. All sport is also entertainment and is
Mm.
also a business, right? So
Yep.
these are things that we do see that in all other sports too. I can definitely say though, as a newer Formula One fan as compared to other, I've consumed other sports for, most of my life, all American sports like basketball,
Hmm.
hockey. Well, hockey's not strictly American, obviously, but
Canadian.
to some degree, American football. Yeah, it's both. To some degree, American football. Things like that. And baseball also in the U.S. is obviously very big. So having come from the background of other sports as compared to Formula One, it is wildly different for me. It was a wildly different experience for me than having followed those other sports, because it's so different in terms of the way a lot of things are set up. In terms of like the way that, like, the power that the teams have, the lack of any discernible information about a lot of the things in the background in terms of officiating or rules, or where you have like mass confusion oftentimes during a race or after a race, or what, as we've experienced, um where it's so strange. Like you don't really see that in other sports to that level. I don't feel
Yeah,
like as you
it's a
do in
pretty
Formula
niche.
One.
It's
It's
a pretty niche sport. It's kind of like
yeah.
it stands out on its own based on the whole format
Hmm.
of it, the whole how it's governed, how it's put together. So it's a pretty
Hmm.
niche sport, you know. So I can
Yeah.
understand that. Can understand that. But
Yeah. Yeah, but
it's
anyway, with the
still
sprint races, like so then some drivers are seem to be, like George Russell always gives the party line of like if it's good for business and good for, then let's do it. Like he's
mm,
and as a younger driver, I think he's probably less concerned about, maybe traditionalism or things the way that maybe some old, although Max is also young, but he's a traditionalist. He's the type that doesn't really want to change
yeah,
things too much. And so there are differing opinions, even among the drivers and probably among other team personnel. So it's kind of one of those things that, I guess we'll see what happens if they, I mean, I think it's very clear that anything they do, anything that Formula One management does, and probably has always done for these reasons. Some of the things that people talk about in terms of modern Formula One and like the Liberty Media era or the Drive to Survive era or things like that. Sometimes when people talk about that stuff as some sort of big contrast to how it used to be in the past, I kind of look at that and go, do you know what happened in the past? Because it's not like things were necessarily vastly different in terms of, in the past it was just an owner like Bernie Ecclestone and other people who were trying to also squeeze every possible nickel they could
yeah,
out of the championship and out of viewers and fans and etc. And just because the attitudes of Liberty Media and other stakeholders have maybe shifted in the sense of the way they present themselves, the way they outwardly talk about, oh, we want fans to be happy, we love the fans, we wouldn't be
hmm
here if not for the fans, etc. In the background, really things haven't changed materially, I would say, as compared to how things used to be. It's just that there's like a nice sheen put over everything, as where it's more like publicly palatable to people. But when you hear things about like Stefano Domenicali saying that just because you have a race that you've had for a long time, in wherever location, doesn't mean you're guaranteed to have that race in the future or things like that. I mean, when you look at things like that, you think it's got to be a fact that a lot of these older tracks, you can't squeeze 400,000 people in there over the course of a weekend like you can at the newer tracks,
Silverstone.
the
Yeah,
more, yeah. And so there's not gonna be as much money made
and I
at
think
that track, or
And I think one of the biggest things as well is Formula One fans don't like change. And
right.
I think that's one of the biggest things that's um unrecognized at the moment. They don't like change, and especially if they feel like this change is just gonna be like a gimmicky, like we're saying, sprint race.
Right.
I mean, what's wrong with the current format of Formula One? I mean, it's pretty much the exact same. For you go into any other motorsport, they do the exact. Pretty much the same format.
Hmm.
Nothing has really
Yeah.
changed. But it's only Formula One that feels, oh, we can't. We have too much practice sessions. Have you ever seen MotoGP?
Didn't
Have
they
you?
introduce sprints this season in
Yeah,
MotoGP and they've
MotoGP.
worked
You
out
know,
really well?
yeah,
They've worked
MotoGP.
out well, haven't they?
Yeah, MotoGP are doing sprint races for every round of the season,
Right, right.
right?
Yeah.
But I'm saying, they're complaining. George Russell saying, "Oh, maybe we have too much practice session." I'm like, have you ever seen MotoGP? Have you? It's Formula One now. If we look at practice, because we're talking about people, uh, fans don't like change. Formula One now has less practice sessions than a couple years ago, back in the last, I don't know, before Lewis came in. I can't remember how far
Right.
back I need to go, because you used to have all the practice sessions qualified, and on a Sunday morning you had a warm up session where you could go
Hmm.
again and do more practice sessions. So it's actually been reduced. But
Right. And there
again,
used to be tons of
exactly,
testing in the
fans
past,
don't.
and now
We
it's like
don't.
nothing.
Yeah, we just don't like change, and I think it's more on the basis of, if they feel like the change is just being done to create a false sense of entertainment.
Drama.
Yeah, drama. Exactly. It kind of riles people up. And it's the same thing with sprint race because the sprint race format hasn't really offered anything new. Have we had a in the sprint race? Have we had a winner of a sprint race outside of the top three teams as yet? I don't think so.
No, none of them have been bangers other than, the Brazilian, the famous, Brazilian one in 2021 obviously, and the reason for that was because Lewis was coming from the back, and you're not
Yeah,
always going to have that obviously.
yeah. So there's
In
no. It hasn't really. Has it? It hasn't. I don't think it has
Yeah.
added anything different because it's just like I don't get it.
Yeah.
And
I
again,
think the
this goes
jury's
back
still
to the
out. We'll
it
see.
will be up, but if you look at the path that Dominic Harley's trod in and Liberty, then what I think if it was up to them, you'd have sprint race at every race weekend.
Right.
So you'd have
Right.
so currently we have what 23 races this year. So you'd have had
Yeah.
basically what 46 races over the whole entire season. That's just too much
Right.
because even myself now I've argued that there's too many races on the calendar. 23 races is
Yeah, I
way
think
too
so
much for
too.
me. I think it should have
I
been
think so
capped
too.
at maximum 20.
Mhm.
Or because
Yeah.
what you find is if you start adding more races, DNFs become less important.
Mhm.
The impact of a DNF is no longer felt because you have enough time to recoup that lost points. Because
Yeah.
case in point, if we had 17 races or 16 races last year, those two DNFs that Max encountered would have derailed this season significantly. But
Right.
the fact that he had an additional 19 races to recover those points lost didn't impact him that much. So if you have one now with 23 races, 24 races,
Yeah.
you're not going to feel it because you still have enough time to recover. And I think
Yeah,
so,
it's an
you know,
interesting point because
yeah,
I wonder if it also affects the way people would race as well. Because
yeah,
if you have fewer races in which to, and you're, fighting for the championship, and you have fewer opportunities to score points, then I'm sure it affected people differently in the past in terms of how they would race. Whether you would have a situation, would you have had a situation if you had a 17 race season in 2021, would Max still have uh, done some of the things he did? Would other drivers have done some of the things they did?
probably
We
wouldn't
don't.
have.
Maybe, probably not, because maybe they'd be like, well, there's only this many races, and I can't be stupid because I
Exactly.
have to bank the points. And so, yeah,
Exactly.
it's actually an interesting point. Yeah, it's. I
It's
think
just
there's.
change. Formula
Yeah,
One fans
yeah.
don't like change, and they don't, and
Well, you've
especially
heard
if it fits.
Domenicali being out there saying like that there's so many people that want Formula One races because we're so huge and popular now, and we could have like 34 races or some ridiculous thing like that. When he said that, I was just like, oh my god, like I can't
That's
stop,
NASCAR.
Stefano.
That's
That's
NASCAR.
insane,
That's NASCAR
insane.
sort of thinking
Yeah,
30, and we've we're too far in. We have too many races right now. At 23
yeah,
races is just too much. You're talking about from
yeah.
March
I hope it
to
doesn't go
December.
up.
That's
Yeah,
9 months, March to December, when previously
it's
seasons
insane.
would go up to, I think it's probably like October. Seasons would
Yeah,
finish in
yeah.
October, and you have
Hmm.
it, and then it doesn't restart again until is it February or March. I can't remember, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah, I
know,
think 20 is a good sweet spot. Like they
yeah, and
have
just leave it at that.
in yeah, like in here in the US in IndyCar, for example, we have there's 17 races that they have on the calendar right now, and they talk a lot about how they could benefit from having, a few more, because this way, with them having only 17, they finish so early as compared to other, they finish before F1. Obviously NASCAR, as you said, goes on forever, and NASCAR is more popular here in the US, not with me personally, but with other people. um, and uh, and so they're like, we need, we would need to have more races than 17. And yes, I think if something like 20 is like a good number, but let's not get ridiculous and start saying things like 36 or whatever. It would
Yeah,
just
that's just
devalue the
exactly,
championship, I feel like,
exactly.
also. And
It
then
it becomes
I think about all
pointless.
the people that have to, all the people that travel to the track and all the people that work on all the teams, like they would have to, like for me, I mean, okay, maybe I guess if you wanted to do that, if you wanted to expand it that much, but then I would expand the cost cap to make it so that so teams could have, like, let's say 2 different crews or something like that.
Hmm.
So this crew travels like to half the races, and then the other crew travels to the other half of the races or
Well,
something like
I
that. So if
mean,
you need to hire a lot more people.
they currently do that. I mean, some teams right now they rotate team members. I
But I
think
gotta
most.
believe the smaller teams don't have the resources to do that,
No,
and
they
so they're
don't.
having to have their people go to
Exactly.
all the, yeah. So
Yeah.
and they wouldn't unless things changed in terms of giving them more resource. Someone like Haas, even now, like I remember they were asking recently, they were asking Gunther about, like, what are people, what have you told the team as far as, that now that we've had this like long period off that we normally wouldn't have had because China got canceled, that what's the team doing, what are people, and Gunther's like, listen, I've told them to just like relax, take a break, really get some rest in, etc., because then it's going to be like boom 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 boom, and you're
Non-stop
not going to get any rest. Yeah, not going to get any
August.
rest for a long time. it's
Until
it's
August.
scary. Like I worry about all those people. Like there was that piece that I forget when this came out. I'll put a link for you guys in the show notes, of course, as per usual. I will find it. Of, it was like this anonymous F1 mechanic who wrote a story for someone,
Oh yeah, I
from
remember
his
that.
point of view. Yeah, talking about what it's like on the road, going to these races and all the work they have to do, and even with the curfew, even like he's like, everyone's on painkillers or is like an alcoholic, or etc., like this type of thing.
It's a
And I'm sure
stressful job.
they're, yeah, I'm sure there could be like some degree of exaggeration there, but like when I read that, I was like, I was appalled and really saddened by it, because these people they're really, if you think about it, they're being exploited because of the fact that you could say, and a lot of people had this response, which is always horrible. A lot of people, when they read that, or they saw that, they were like, oh yeah, like tough luck, like you get to work in Formula One, like shut up, basically. And that's a horrible attitude, because of course that there's so many industries like that, and I've worked in some of them myself, like in media, or in there are other things like that where people work for very little money, in an industry that's considered prestige, attractive industry that a lot of people want to be in, and that it has some, that it makes you out to be a cooler person than someone else who's like an accountant or whatever. Things like that.
Yeah,
People think
accountants
it's
are
very
cool.
glamorous. People think it's,
Account-
like glamorous
Yeah,
to work in Formula
people
One
think
or in
because you're in
certain other
Formula One.
industries.
Yeah, a lot of people think because you work in Formula One, it's you've
Yeah.
now you're now in some sort of, I know, I mean, do they really get paid that much? Because I mean, the average
I don't
engineer,
think it's great. I
yeah,
don't think
I
it's
think the
great. I mean,
average engineer in Formula One probably makes about 70 grand a year, probably
yeah, I don't know
50,
that
60
somebody
enough.
actually
Yeah.
asked in our Ask an F1 Engineer Twitter space, and if I still can find the recording on there, I don't know how long Twitter keeps them. I'll link to that for you guys too if you want to hear it, because I did record the space. Someone did ask about like salaries for engineers in Formula One, and my friend doesn't work trackside, but I don't think it would really matter necessarily whether you work at the factory or at the track, how
Hmm.
much you're getting paid. At least I don't believe so. But it was, entry level. It was not a lot. I think it
Yeah.
was like, offhand, I think it was something like, 30 or 40,000 pounds. This is in UK, for when you're just fresh out of school or something, whatever. Obviously, you're going to make more money eventually,
Hmm.
if you stay at the team and advance in your career. But yeah, it's just not necessarily that much money. And, people also ask, like, do you get to go to the track? Do you get to go there? He's like, no, we don't get any. There's no discount tickets or anything like that. There's no like, just come to the track. Like, we don't, they and that's, I mean, paddock passes are, if you work at a team and you can't even get a paddock pass, what
Ooh,
hope does anyone else have?
yeah.
Basically, they basically, there's no reason they would
It's not as
have people.
It's not as glamorous as people
No,
think it is. It's glamorous for
no,
the
no, it's really
drivers,
not.
but not for the
Right,
mechanics
exactly,
and the backroom
exactly.
staff.
Exactly.
It's not
Yeah.
glamorous. It's a
Yeah,
tough
I think about
life.
those people. I think about those people all the time, and I think about the fact that, again, people have this attitude of like, well, you should be grateful just to be working in like a cool job like this, but that's not, that can't sustain someone forever. I can speak from personal experience. When you're not getting paid and you're not necessarily be, I mean, they do, I think they get respected and appreciated and stuff like
Hmm.
that for sure, but it's like, but there, that doesn't help you at the end of the day when when the driver's making however much money they're making, the team principals are making however much money they're making, the engineers are making the money they're making, etc., and you're, as a mechanic or as whoever, are getting paid much much less and working just as hard if not harder, than some
Some
of those other
ridiculous
people. It
hours as
just,
well.
yeah,
They do some. I mean, and I think that's why they brought the curfew in, because
yeah,
you had
yeah.
people who were working all night shifts.
Oh
They'd be
yeah,
at back
yeah.
from like
That was
6 in the
normal
morning, and
before. Yeah.
they don't leave until like 2, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning.
Mhm.
And that's kind of like, those are just, and
Yeah.
labor laws would tell you, that's not acceptable.
No.
You're
No, it's a
breaking
form of
so many labor laws.
exploitation.
Yeah.
It's, again, it's a form of exploitation, like we have obviously that all over the place in late stage capitalism. Obviously, this is not the only place where we see that sort of thing,
Hmm.
but it's super prominent, in Formula 1, I feel like, and because of the fact that, again, it's pretty much no one is going to be working this hard for this little money in an industry that's not considered, something that people are not as passionate about. Like, I've seen it also in the video game industry and other creative industries. Again, people get sort of taken advantage of because when you're really passionate about something and you love it, you're willing to do a job sometimes for less money than you would, if you didn't aspire growing up to be, I keep bringing up accounting. I'm sorry to all the accountants. I'm
Uh,
sure your work is very
uh,
interesting in its own way.
Apology accepted.
But but if you didn't, probably no one when they're a little kid, and get asked what do you want to do when you grow up, says like an accountant or a project manager or things like that.
Hmm.
People get paid more for those types of jobs, I think, partially because of that, right? Because you're not, this isn't like your passion and goal in life,
Yep.
to be that thing. Whereas something like Formula One or a creative field, or being a writer, or things like that, people tend to think that you should just be happy that you get to work in the field, and it shouldn't be that way.
It's not, because again, it's that representation people have to think that, okay, you're in the paddock, you work there, it's this glamorous, you get to see all the glitz, and no, you don't. You're there to do a job
No,
like everybody
yeah,
else. You don't have time to
yeah,
be running around mingling with celebrities, getting autographs. No, you have a job
exactly.
to do, and you're there to work. You're being paid to work. So it's not all glitz and
Yeah,
glamour. It's hard work,
no,
very hard work. So, and
it
it
is.
a lot of people get burnt out from it, and I'm
Oh
sure,
yeah, yeah,
especially
for
when you're doing
sure.
all of these, people talk, you haven't seen your family for weeks upon weeks, or
Yeah,
you get a
yeah,
weekend.
that's got to be brutal.
Yeah, you
That's
get
got
a
to be
weekend
brutal.
here, a weekend there, and then you're gone again. And it's all, but
Yeah, if you're
you
like
know
younger and single, it's probably easier, but there are definitely people there who have families and who back
yeah,
home, and they're not seeing them for long periods of time, and that's got to be hard as well. But
yeah,
anyway, I wanted to ask you something else that
go on.
might be a fun topic. So obviously, a big part of Formula One fandom these days is, there's so many content creators, there's so many people making content, and you sort of, in a way, you're sort of part of that because you do the Twitter Spaces a lot of the time that you host, which is a type of content as well, even though it's not as permanent as other things. But do you have? How do you feel like, especially since you've been a fan, like you said, before there was social media, before anything, before the internet really existed, and now we're in this, brave new world, or some might say not really. Some people feel, differently about it. How do you feel about everything? Do you feel like, do you consume a lot of stuff that content creators do, or do you still stick more to more like mainstream sources?
A few content creators I'll pay attention to. I'll listen to.
Other than us, of
Oh,
course, right?
yeah, of course. Yeah. So I mean, in terms of, like, I'm not too. I don't know. I've got a somewhat short attention span, so I can't. I genuinely can't sit and listen to podcasts from start to finish. Something will
Mhm.
come and distract me, and I just go, oh, I can't be bothered, and I'll move on. But when I do, I'll I listen to people like Missed Apex, because
Mhm.
Spanners Ready, who runs Missed Apex, I knew Spanners from when I knew I was. I knew him from where he started with another website, so I know where he's
Mhm.
coming from, and I know his content is good. I'm friends with Matt Trumpets. Whenever I'm in New York, I meet up with him, and whenever he's here,
Aw,
if I get a
nice.
chance, yeah. So if he's here, he was here recently, but I didn't know he was in the UK, but he wasn't in London, so I
Mhm.
didn't meet up with him. But I listen to some like Miss Epics. I listen to Quick Stop. I listen to yourself. The guys over at Pit Stop Fracas, but some
Yeah, I
podcast
love them too.
I don't really listen because I don't know I, I find that a lot of people are jumping on this. Let's create content, but what's your content? Is your content just for gimmicks, or are you presenting factual information, that people can
Mhm.
actually rely on and and base certain things off? I've listened, I've seen, so everyone's just jumping on this thing. Let's create content, and the content that they're putting out is not that great. It's absolutely
Mhm.
not that great.
Yeah.
I was on my Instagram recently, and something popped up for this content creator, and when I listened to it, I was like, what in the hell are you talking about? That's not the information that's out there. You're actually telling lies when the
Yeah.
actual information is out there. So people are putting out content
Mhm.
just for putting out content, and they're not
Yeah.
presenting any factual information.
Mhm.
You see the
Yeah,
in
there's a lot of that.
yeah,
There's a lot of that.
you see what happened last night with those last week with those guys from I don't know, what was it called, Pit Stop? Pit Stop is the name of the
Yeah,
podcast
yeah,
with
I
those
know what you're
guys
talking
who
about. Yeah.
basically saying
Yeah.
we
Right.
don't know nothing,
Right.
and I'm like, okay, so
Yeah. Yeah.
why are you doing a
Yeah, that's
bit
their shtick.
exactly, so why are you doing a F1 podcast, right, when you don't really care about the
Yeah.
sport, you don't know anything about the
Mhm.
sport, you don't even know who the driver was that was sitting in front of you you you
Yeah.
know so
That was
what's the point
crazy.
if you're doing this? Are you doing this because you actually like the sport, or are you just doing it for
Mhm.
as a because okay, it would get you some followers and would get you some clicks and some likes and some traffic on your
Yeah.
YouTube channel, and at some point you can monetize it and so on. So I'm cool. I have cool because the sport is for everybody, and I have no problem with it. It's free, so people should come in and watch. I don't really care whether you're DTS. I very rarely refer to people as DTS fans because
Yeah.
there has to be an avenue for someone to come to get into the
That's
sport.
right.
And if your avenue was via DTS, I have no problem with it. That's how you got in. That's how you got in. But if you get in through that door, and you've then taken the opportunity to learn about the sport, inform yourself, and so on, then that tells me that you care. But you have a lot of people who come in through that door, and they really don't give a damn. They don't
Right.
take the opportunity to, you know, build their knowledge base, be more informative,
Mm.
understand the whole technical aspect of the sport and everything about it. They just, oh yeah, I mean, I saw it on Netflix, so let me just come in. And now they start doing
I mean, I take the
podcasts.
approach. I'll tell you, I take the approach kind of that, like, I definitely think that, and I came in largely through Drive to Survive, not entirely, but not 100%, but largely. And, yeah, for sure. I don't care how people come into anything, what gets them first interested in it. And I think that if you're just a fan, who watches or talks to your friends about it, or talks to people at the bar about it, or at the pub, as you would say, and then I don't care if you're just a casual fan who doesn't know every detail and every whatever. I think that when you're somebody that makes content about something, though, you should have at least some baseline level of knowledge, and
Exactly,
that's of course why
understanding.
people got upset, justifiably so,
And
at
that's why
those
people
guys,
follow you.
because
People are going to listen
yeah.
to you because if your content also
Yeah.
have to be informative. It can't
Yeah.
just be just you and your friends sitting down talking nonsense and
Right.
like,
I mean,
okay,
that can be
where's
funny. That can be funny, but it's better if there's knowledge behind it, of course.
yeah,
Like,
there
that's
has to
I
be
enjoy.
some knowledge
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
mean, I saw a clip with that same. I don't even like. I don't even want to plug them. But I saw a clip
Don't do it then.
where they asked the guy what teams Seb Vettel drove for,
Right.
and they literally didn't know who one of them said Haas, and I was like, okay,
Oh no.
this is just. are you actually being serious, or are you actually and I get the impression that he genuinely didn't know. But you're presenting a
Right.
podcast about Formula One, and
Yeah.
you can't tell the teams that said Vettel drove for. How does that?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
what
don't
does
I
that say?
think if you're just a fan, there should be no barrier to entry for sure. And like the way that people, this past season of Drive to Survive, I mean, I'm not as interested in watching it anymore as I probably used to be before I was more like a, fully fledged fan. But I still watch it because, people are going to talk about it, and I'm curious how things are presented, and framed and all that. And in this past season, there was somebody that came up to Seb to get their autograph, his autograph, and she said something like, I forget what she said. Like she's been watching him since he was at Ferrari or something like that, meaning she wasn't watching when he was at Red Bull. And there were people online who were like, "Oh, what you're so you've been a fan for like 5 minutes," things like that. It's like, again, you can be a fan and you don't have to know everything. You don't have to know. It's like the way also that often gets levied more against female fans, as I'm sure
Yeah,
and people who are like, "Oh, you're an F1 fan, name every part of an F1 car," or something like that. Whereas a man says to another man that they're an F1 fan, it's just like, "Oh, okay, cool, cool." There's no barrier to entry usually there as much as it is for female fans. And so when it's things like that, I'm like, no, that's, there shouldn't be a barrier. But yeah, when you're making some kind of content, and there can be, like, I do enjoy some content creators myself who are, maybe they have knowledge or etc., but their content might be more just like frivolous and fun or silly or something like that, and that's fine too. I think that whatever people do that it's entertaining to somebody, and if people are enjoying it, then cool. But yeah, it is a big problem, I think, in the fandom in general, and something that's like one of the reasons that I'm still, even though I haven't been doing this for that long, one of the reasons that I want to be here and want to make content is because I'm kind of hoping to try to use knowledge I have about, in terms of like media literacy, in terms of the way journalism works, in terms of the way that reporting works, because I've worked in that industry myself, not in sports but in other areas. And so and it shouldn't be arguably that different in sports as it is in other types of reporting, although we do see large differences oftentimes. But I'm hoping to like bring that knowledge and that perspective to this that, a lot of people may not have. Like I'm constantly surprised on what, I'm not surprised because it happens with regular journalism too, like non-sports or non-F1, where people will share something online and it's from some bizarre, like, no name source or something that's not not really a real, or it's like someone's blog or something like that, or whatever the case may be. And they share it, and then of course a lot of people look at it uncritically and don't realize that it may not be factually based, and it may not have accurate information and stuff like that, and then it gets spread all over the place, and then now it's too late to
yep.
to really, and so it's like people have to have that knowledge to be able to look at something and say, okay, this might be true, but it's probably just a rumor, or like this is, or to, like, when you read a story, like even just a text, just the text, a story that's just telling you whatever it's telling you about a team or a driver, let's say, or whatever, or some situation, when you read it and you can look at certain things, like who have they talked to for the story, what are the different, who are, oftentimes in Formula One, and sadly in other things too, you'll have, like, it's a story, there's like, it's just like one person said this thing, you know
Yeah. There's
and
no.
it's not, there's no, it's that's not a real story. I mean, it's, it's something for people to talk about, and like stuff like that gets a lot of attention,
But it
sure,
creates.
but
But it's that shock factor. It creates a
yeah,
buzz. It gets
exactly.
traffic, it gets
Yep.
clicks, and I think so.
Mhm.
A lot of people do that. You know,
Yeah.
create a hysteria, and from once it creates a
Yeah.
buzz, it gives them viewership. And
Yeah, and
I
people
guess it's
claim
some.
to hate that. A lot of people talk about, like, oh, I hate, like, it's like clickbait or whatever. But then they're the ones, retweeting something or posting something that, that is shameless clickbait. Or like when people who have, if you have a large platform, I feel like, you have a
Yep.
responsibility of some kind to try to present factual information insofar as you can. I mean, of course, sometimes everyone gets things wrong, or you might post something, or even somebody who is in an official journalistic capacity can post something and it might turn out to not be right, or then you have to do your best to try to correct it. You have to, then say, okay, that was an error and here's the correct information, whatever. But it's like when people with these large platforms sometimes online. Like recently there was this account on Twitter that's, I guess, for for Tifosi, for Ferrari fans, that's got like 135,000 people following them or something on Twitter. I mean, even though those numbers don't necessarily reflect, the reality sometimes, or who knows if they've bought those, or I don't know. But like but
Yeah.
they had there was like this tweet that got a lot of attention, where they were like, "Oh my god, it turns out Mercedes had input
Oh,
on the when the hybrid engine was, was brought, and
from
like this,
2007
right,
and the
like what
engine.
a
I know
scandal."
the tweet. I remember. I know the tweet because I had to comment on the tweet and like, I mean, do you guys actually know
uh,
what you're talking about? Because there, this rumor that Mercedes had somehow insider information about what the power unit were going to be for 2014 from 2007, kind of like that's a bit odd, given that these regulations weren't fully agreed until 2011. I think it was in June 2011 they were fully agreed after the original idea that they had. And, you know, Mercedes actually started working on based on the information that they were given, which they had to scrap because Ferrari came back and said, well, we don't, an inline, is it, an inline four cylinder really doesn't do anything for us as a manufacturer because we don't build cars with inline fours, yada yada yada. So they had to scrap
like
it. They
even
came back.
beyond all that,
Yeah.
any team would take, especially in Formula One, where we know it's an extremely competitive, extremely, type of environment, where you will kind of do anything to win. And we see teams do that consistently, where they'll do anything to win, gain any advantage they can. Any team, if they have an opportunity to have input, which they all kind of do, the engine
Hmm.
manufacturers in this case would do the same. Like
Yeah.
there's no one's gonna, it's not some big revelation or
Exactly.
Scandal. And but you
It's not the
but things like that happen. Yeah.
it's not the gotcha moment that they were looking for to prove because
Right.
what you
Right.
presented, and the worst part about it, the person in the clip wasn't even a Mercedes engineer. He was Sam Bird, who was a
Yeah.
test driver, simulator driver for Mercedes. So he wasn't actually an engineer, so he didn't know what the hell he was talking about. But they presented this information as a gotcha moment. It got a lot of clicks, it
Yeah.
got a lot of views, it got
Yeah.
a lot of angry fans, tifosis, Red Bull fans, people
Mhm.
screaming, "Oh, see, Lewis Hamilton should lose his championship because they're legal and all."
Oh
And I'm
my
like,
god.
but it created the buzz it wanted to create. You know what I mean? Because
Sure.
it had the
Yeah.
clicks, it had the traffic. Because if you
Yep.
look at the traffic, it probably told you it probably had like 100,000 views or whatever it
I'm
is.
sure. I'm
Which I
sure.
think eventually they deleted the tweet because they realized,
Yeah.
yeah. And the funny thing about it, the person who gave them that information is another person who creates content, but his content is so in so factually wrong. Is that how I phrase it?
Yeah.
Factually wrong?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
factually wrong. It's unbelievable. And but these are the people who are presenting information that someone out there
Yeah.
takes that person's information, runs with it without thinking to themselves, hold on a second, this doesn't seem
Yeah.
right. Let me go and
Yeah, it's a
look
real
further
problem.
into this
It's a real
and
problem
figure out
that
what's
people
going
don't
on.
know how to evaluate information that they're receiving.
And I
It's
think
it's a
this is
tough thing to do.
and I think this is where the whole people then come in with the DTS fan sort of narrative because
Right.
someone like me, when I saw the clip, the tweet, and I listened to it, I started to laugh to myself because I know the whole backstory of how they got to the 2014 power unit. So I
Yeah.
knew right away that information you're presenting is actually false. It's not actually correct because I know the full story. But you'll have someone who are a newer fan, right? Don't know this,
Mhm.
and they immediately take this on board as to being actually
Yeah.
true. And and they
Yeah.
run with it. And that's the dangerous part about it when we talk about
Yeah.
you have to be careful the information you put out there because
For
your
sure.
information is what forms other people's opinion. And if you're going to present false information, it's going to present false opinion from a lot of people. So you have to be very careful. You can't just throw anything out there. But again, you have those who do it for the shock value of it,
Yeah.
because okay, that
Yeah,
can
yeah,
generate
we're gonna
traffic. You know?
for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, no, at some point I'm actually gonna do a and if people are interested in this, you can comment below, or you can send us an email. I'll give you our email address a little later, so you have to keep listening. Or you can find it in some places like our Twitter, our YouTube channel, etc. But if people are interested, especially in this, let me know, because I've been wanting to do like a kind of like a media literacy type episode. Like, here's how you look at things critically. Here's how you can be like, try to suss out what's actually true and what's not, whether this reporting is good or not, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm probably going to do something like that soon. So keep an eye out for that, because I don't want to do it like as a service to try to help people, because I
Hmm.
know that it's not something that, it's not like something you're taught in school. And this is a problem, obviously, not just in people consuming information about Formula One and other sports, but in much more serious topics too, where people are reading
Yep.
things or watching things online about all kinds of topics and get all kinds of bizarre ideas, when it's just some like conspiracy theorist making a video or something like that, and people are like, oh my god, like, it's I
Yeah,
can't believe it, and it has no factual basis. But okay,
that's true.
before I'm gonna try to be more cognizant of everyone's time and respect everyone's time. So I'm trying to make these episodes not go on forever. But very quickly, before we do our tweet of the week, which is something we try to do on every episode, I wanted to ask you, even though this may not be a quick thing, about basically Mercedes. Like, this is where we kind of, I feel like we've had like some, maybe, sort of not disagreement, but like we view things, I think, a little bit differently in terms of what's going on with Mercedes, and as far as, the technical missteps this season, last season, etc., and who is accountable for that, who might be to blame, or what they should be doing to turn things around. Talk to me about. You seem to be someone who has, at least it seems like to me, total faith in the team and total belief that everything's going to be okay. They're going to figure things out. They didn't make a mistake maybe this season, or do you feel that they did, and sticking with the concept from last season? Talk to me about that.
Well, okay, because I've been accused of being a Mercedes defender, and I get and apparently I'm on the payroll.
Which is
But
okay
well,
if that's
yeah,
how you
well, I
feel.
mean, but the thing is, this is how I look at it, right? With the beauty of hindsight, people you can say a lot of things, right? And I think a lot of what people are saying now is based on hindsight, not what not what presented itself at the time. I've you've heard a lot of stories. They chose the wrong concept. In 20 last year, people were saying, oh, they chose the wrong concept, but what was the right concept? It was a fresh set of regulations, and when you have a fresh set of regulations, your task is to go in as hard as you can to try and get yourself a firm footing, so you build yourself an advantage, so at least by the time you're so far ahead, by the time people catch up, it's too late. Case in point, 2014 with the power unit took teams all forever how long to catch them up. So what they did last year, I had no problem with the concept with their approach, because they had to do something different. They wanted to get themselves ahead of the curve. Unfortunately, something presented itself that they didn't um, factor into their whole equation. I don't think any team, with the exception of Adrian Newey, factored in the porpoising, because everybody experienced it. Ferrari experienced it worse than Mercedes. The problem for Mercedes was it started to manifest itself at a lower speed, while for Ferrari it's at a higher speed. Now, throughout the year, they were dealing with problems. If it was just one problem, then we'd understand, but they were dealing with multiple problems, and you could see that they were making progress as the year um, got on. Now, they won in Brazil. There were circumstances around that win, and you can somewhat understand why they believe that. It wasn't just the Brazil win that gave them the confidence to say, okay, we're going to stick to this concept, or we're going to evolve it for this year. It wasn't that. You could see over the season, from the second half of the season, Lewis scored more points than the only person who scored more points than Lewis was Max, the second half
Mm-hmm.
of the season. So there was a run where they went five straight races on the podium. So you could see that they were improving. So there were signs there that they were improving. So it was I can understand why they didn't. They thought, well, we're not going to ditch it as yet because we have a belief that there's goodness in it. It can work, and I'm cool with that because they're trying to make something work. Coming into this year, again, they 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 made the changes that they needed to make. Some of it didn't work. Some work. They said in testing that the car that we see now won't be the same car come. I think it said race six. They told us this from testing. So all the information all what we're seeing now and the information that we're getting now about the car is going to change for Imola was already known. But people tend I always say people hear but they don't listen. There's a difference between hearing something and listening. So you hear something,
True.
yeah, oh yeah. But if you listen closer to what they were saying, you'd have understand that the first five races of the season is going to be a nightmare for them. They literally say,
Yeah.
no,
Well, and it has
okay,
to be said that they did make gains,
yes,
obviously, over the winter,
yes, they
except
make
that,
gains,
a lot of, they just didn't, no one expected Red Bull to have also
and this is
made the,
and
the
this is the
gains that
thing.
they
I had a
did.
conversation. I think it was in one of my spaces. I had a conversation, and I had
Mm,
another one with Bryson a couple weeks after, where people were saying they set their targets too low, and I'm like, but
right.
how can you say they set their targets too low? What was the target? Because there
Hmm.
was I can't remember where I watched it, where they said they pretty much have an idea of how much a team is going to improve its performance the following year based on certain data that they gather throughout the season.
Hmm.
So it's only obvious that they probably their information said, well, Red Bull is probably going to improve the performance maybe by half a second. So
Right.
we're currently we're currently um, half a second behind. So if we want to be on the same footing, we need to increase. We need to get our at a second and a half in terms of performance. So they've got a target. But what you don't know is you don't know how well the other team is going to improve. Red Bull turn up and they've improved beyond what anybody thought they
Right.
would have, right?
Yeah.
Same thing for
It's
Aston. So,
insane.
so the idea to say now that they set their targets too low is, but you don't even know what the targets were. You cannot say they say. So hindsight is what's driving a lot of these things. Okay, they've
Yeah, no,
admitted.
I agree
They've
with that. I
admitted.
agree with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've admitted that the concept, looking at it now, because I think they knew the concept wasn't going to work, which is why they were working on making the package come for Imola. So they pretty
Hmm.
much kind of knew. I think they said they had an idea it wasn't going to work. They would need to make change, but they needed to get that verification based in what on
Right.
Bahrain, and they got that answer. Now
Yeah.
I'm cool.
They sure did.
Mistakes happen, they got it wrong. And the thing is where I give them credit. Most people won't agree with this. Is the fact that they came out and they said, yeah, we got it wrong. We're gonna have to make changes. And we've started the process of making those changes. We're doing things differently. We're seeing where we're making significant gains by taking a different approach to what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's the most because remember the first thing to when it comes to crisis management is you have to actually acknowledge that you have a crisis. If you keep
Right.
saying, "Oh, we don't have a crisis," it's like Ferrari. The whole entire
Like
Maranello
Ferrari,
is
yeah.
burning down, and they keep saying, "Oh, no, 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 no! We believe in our pack. We believe in our concept. It's going to work."
That
And
seems to
everyone's
be
like,
their MO. That
"Exactly,
seems to be their MO because last year it was Mattia Binotto. This year it's Fred Vasseur.
yeah,
I thought maybe we would see a different attitude from a different person, but it must be something to do with Ferrari that like you're
exactly."
just like not allowed to say that there's a problem.
Exactly.
You're
So
something.
Mercedes has said, yes, I think they made mistakes along the way. The
Yeah.
statements from Lewis saying, "Oh, they didn't listen to me," and people have taken that on board. Like, okay, they didn't listen. If they had listened to Lewis, the car would be. You don't know that, and we don't even know
Yeah, no, I agree.
we don't even know
I agree with that.
exactly
Yeah.
what Lewis meant when he said they didn't
Right.
listen. What
Right.
was he talking about?
Yeah.
We don't know because
Yeah.
on there was I'm plugging them. I don't know if I should, but I hope you don't mind. Um, the Mr. Apex podcast recently did an
Yeah.
episode with Matt Summerfield, right? He's the technical
Right, right.
analyst for Autosport,
Yeah.
and I think is it Autosport or
Sure.
the race?
Sure.
And
Probably a lot of different things.
yeah, and he read out the actual quote that Lewis was talking about, what Lewis said when he, and I can't remember
Right.
exactly what he said, but I can't remember what it was, but either way, Lewis wasn't talking about the overall concept of the car. He was talking about
Sure.
something. And Lewis is a driver. Yes, he's the driver and he's the one sitting in the car and he knows what he wants, but you're not going to overrule a whole entire technical department and say this is
Right.
exactly
No,
because
yeah,
because what
that
it
came up
okay,
in my Ask an F1
yeah,
engineer thing too, because people did ask, that was something that was a question that someone had was like, how much, do engineers take the driver's feedback into account? And of course they take it into account, but they're at the end of the day, engineers are dealing with data and with
yeah,
numbers, and they're not really able to, especially during the design process. There's not, they get feedback from the drivers, of course, and from maybe their test drivers or whoever, but it's like there's only they're not going to be like, oh, my data says this and the driver says that, let me just go against everything that
exactly
that
because you're
our
going to have
data
to ask
says,
yourself the question, how many times
yeah.
has Lewis suggested something to them and they go, no, Lewis, we're not going to do that, and they went their way and it works. So
Yeah, yeah,
because
it's a complex process
exactly
too,
you can
a
say you
very
can
complex process.
so you can sit here and say, oh, they should have listened to Lewis. Okay, what if they had listened to Lewis and it still went pear shaped? Who are you going to blame, Lewis
Right.
or the team? Because then you're going to turn around and say, well, why did you listen to Lewis? He's just a driver. So it's a no-win
Right,
situation for
right.
them in that
That's true.
regards. But like I
Yeah.
said, I can give them credit. You have to give them credit because they then came out and they were bold and they said, look, yeah, we got it wrong. We didn't do a good enough job, and this is not good enough for a team like us who's aspiring to win. And this is where my trust comes in to them because that team won seven championship, eight championships in a row. You don't win eight championships in a row by not knowing what you're doing. They made a mistake and they've got to rectify that mistake. And I think they've bought themselves enough real estate to be given the time, given the opportunity. Yes, and I think majority of the reaction to what's going on stems from Abu Dhabi 2021
Yeah. Yeah,
because
I think you're right.
which people are
I think if it
still
wasn't for that, we wouldn't have people
exactly
wouldn't probably
if
be as angry.
had it gone down
Yeah.
how it should have gone down, no one would have
Right.
been this angry. But the fact is, it
Yeah.
went that
You're
way,
right.
and Lewis doesn't have much time left in Formula One,
Right.
and we want to
Right.
see him retrieve what was stolen from him, you know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and his window to do that is closing day
Yeah.
by day by day because I only think he has 2 more years left in Formula One. He's going to sign that contract another 2 years, and
You
in
never know. Fernando's still
yeah,
doing
but
well, and
you
he's
see, Fernando is trying to prove something to somebody. Lewis has nothing to prove. Fernando is trying. He's facing his tail. He wants that third title, but he's never going to get that third title.
You're
So
gonna have
Lewis,
to wheel that man out of there on a gurney. Mark my words. Like
yeah,
he's
well,
not.
let
He's
him stay because he's trying to. He's trying. I still maintain. Fernando is trying to one up Lewis, so he's trying to do
right.
something so
Right.
he can get the one up on Lewis, but that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how
Yeah,
many.
did you see how there was a thing recently where he said something about how it would be fun if Lewis and I could close our careers as
Yeah,
teammates on
he
the same team?
doesn't. I don't think he wants to do that because given how it went the first time it happened, I
Yeah,
don't
I
think he
mean,
wants he. It's just Alonso's speech right
I
now.
gotta say it would be kind of interesting though, right?
Yeah,
It would
I
be
think
fascinating.
he'd realize he'd then probably regret it once it happened
Probably,
because he's
probably,
gonna
but yeah,
realize yeah
might be fun.
it was the rookie was this good. I mean, a
Yeah, yeah,
38-year
that's
old,
true.
seven-time eight-time world champion Lewis Hamilton is a different kettle of fish. So,
Yeah, yeah,
but
exactly,
to
exactly.
go back to your question, I don't think the team has held a hand up and they've accepted blame for it. And you have to, people might not agree with me on this, but you give them credit because it takes some character to hold your hand up and say, yeah, we screwed up,
Sure.
we messed up big time, you know, and
Hmm.
and now they're trying to okay steer the ship, put the ship back on course, and I think they can do it because They have the people, they have the resources, they have everything in house to do what they need to do. They're not stupid. And
Yep.
I genuinely believe that they will get it done. Will it be within the 2 years that Lewis still has left? Yeah, I think they will. I personally, I've come out and I've said it. I've
Okay.
nailed,
All
nailed
right.
my
You heard
flag to the
it. You heard it
mast.
here first.
Yeah, I nailed my flag to the mast, and I said next year they're going to be tied to contenders. I think from the get go
Okay. Okay.
they're going
I
to be
hope you're
pushing.
right.
Yeah,
I hope you're right,
I
obviously.
I'm I'm more trying to err on the side of optimism rather than pessimism, because a lot of people like, why are you so optimistic? And I'm like, why shouldn't I be? Why should I? Why am I going to sit here and like, no, I don't believe in Mercer. I don't think that, because I'm like, you're talking about a team that won 8 championships. You
Yeah.
don't, again, over multiple regulations. It's not like they did it on the one set of regs. They did it over, I think it was three different set of regulations.
Right.
So you don't do that because you're not good at your job. They made a mistake.
Right.
Let's let them. Okay, I'm still
Yeah.
gonna ride with them
Yeah,
whatsoever.
I think I like your optimistic attitude, and I try to stay optimistic too, and I think that's how we should leave it at that, because hopefully it'll be this beautiful redemption arc.
Yeah,
As you say, maybe we'll see it even as early as next year. That would be fantastic. I would be fine with it even if it wasn't right away next year, because I do feel that obviously the team has two of arguably some, top drivers, obviously,
they have the
in
best driver
on the
lineup on
grid.
the grid.
Yeah, the best driver. Yeah, as far as the both of them for sure. So I think that there's definitely a high probability of Mercedes drivers often outperforming the car. So even if the car is not necessarily the best car, we still have still a pretty good chance, I think, a lot of the time, which is so I think I'm gonna adopt your optimistic attitude. I like it. You've convinced me, let's say, for now,
For
and
now.
I'm gonna try to be as optimistic as you from now on. I like it. Okay,
Okay.
we're gonna do very quickly our tweet of the week, and then
Okay.
we'll wrap up. So this week we had a fun tweet of the week winner from our very, very loyal listener, Hector Rodriguez, who's Rocket Cheddar on Twitter, which is a fun name that I always enjoy seeing in our mentions. Hector had a really funny response to I posted the video that Lewis had posted on his Instagram, where he's in the pool with his niece and nephew, and like he does a cannonball into the pool. Lewis does, which is hilarious. He's just like a big kid, really, Lewis.
He is.
And he is. It's funny and it's fun. So he does a cannonball, then his niece does the cannonball, and then someone throws in his nephew, which is funny, and it just looks like so much fun. He's having the greatest time. Uncle Lewis content is always some of our favorite content
True.
ever out there, because it's so cute, it's so sweet. And Hector said though that I bet he crushes them in Monopoly later though, no mercy, which I
Yeah,
was like,
because
yeah, maybe
he says
I
he's a
could
bit
see it.
competitive. He says he doesn't like
Yeah.
he's competitive in everything he does. So
Oh yeah,
I
I
can
mean
sort
all
of
these
relate.
guys are all
Yeah.
these guys are, they're the like it could be the stupidest, simplest thing, and they definitely want to be the
Yeah.
best at it no matter what. They're all like that for sure. Otherwise they wouldn't be,
Where they are.
racing drivers. Yeah, for sure. And and Hector actually posted, which I'm gonna put a link for you guys. I think he found it on Etsy. There is a Formula One version of Monopoly that he
Oh
found on there,
yeah,
which
I've
I thought
seen.
looked really cool.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks really fun. Like Lewis, there's different drivers' faces on the money.
Oh,
It's like very well made. It looks very, very cool. And it's hard to see like the street names, but I'm sure they're names of circuits, I think, instead of,
probably
the usual
circuits.
street names. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what they are. And so that looks super cool. And I'm sure a lot of people would want to buy that as a gift for the F1 fan in your life, maybe, or for yourself. Like I'm kind of looking at it going like, oh,
I might get that.
I might need to get that. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. So thank you, Hector. Hector has won tweet of the week in previous episodes as well. And once again, Hector's like the Lewis Hamilton of tweet of the week. He wins it fairly often. So good job again
I'm
there,
gonna have to
Hector.
start competing
Um,
with Hector.
Yeah. Well, maybe someone else can present a challenge. Give it a try. Give it a try, guys. When you reply to things we post, if they're funny or informative or interesting, you too might be a big winner of, again, no prize whatsoever, but our eternal love and admiration and appreciation for you. So that's got to be worth something, I think. So yeah, we'll wrap up. Neil, thank you so much
So
for
weird.
joining us.
So weird hearing my name. People
I
calling my
know.
name.
I,
Like,
I feel
oh,
weird saying it. I
I'm
feel weird saying it too.
I'm
Yeah,
so
it's
used to
strange. It's a
Thanos the
strange feeling.
troublemaker.
I know. Well, again, tell people where they can find you online, which they may already know, but give us a
Yeah, you can
reminder.
find me on, as usual, on Twitter. Just go anywhere where you see a dumpster fire happening and there's chaos. That's probably my account. So you can find me at Thanos876. That's 7HANOS876. I'm always on Twitter creating havoc,
Yeah.
but I do it.
I
I
think
do it.
there's a lot of other people you could say that about in terms of a
eh,
dumpster fire on Twitter, but
Yeah,
but that's
true.
that's an elite group, we
That's
might
true.
say.
That's true.
Yeah.
But you can find me on there. I normally race weekends. I tend to host a Twitter space for like I do them for during I do them the whole weekend. So I do practice sessions, I do post qualifying, and I do post race Twitter spaces. So if anybody wants to come in, it's an informal sort of chat. Everybody's free to come in. If you want to come in and say give your piece, your opinion, we let you in. Even if you want to talk about toilets in India, which I had someone did once, you're free to come in.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
That is, there you go.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
great advertisement, so to speak,
yeah,
for joining the spaces. You might hear some fascinating information like that. That
yeah.
sounds pretty different and interesting. All right. As usual, thank you guys for listening. If you've made it this far, especially, make sure you follow us on all the socials. We are at racing_incident on Twitter and Instagram. You can, of course, please do subscribe to the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel. In the future, hopefully, we'll be doing more things than just posting video from the podcast. We shall see. But definitely give us a subscribe, a like, comment if you have questions or concerns. You can also email us. The email is racingincidentpod, so racingincidentpod at gmail.com. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let us know. We're always here to listen, if not necessarily to reply or take your advice on board. Just kidding. I usually am very open minded to things like that, especially if you're a loyal listener. Let us know how we can do better. If there's something you're interested in us doing, let us know. And yeah, give us a 5-star review if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And I think other than that, we are done. So we will say bye.
Bye everyone. And if you don't give them 5 stars, Thanos is gonna come and look for you. I've got the Infinity Stones.
Yeah,
Remind him.
that's
I've got
right.
I've got the Infinity Stones. I've got all of them.
There you go. There you go.
All
Perfect.
right.
Thank
All right.
you.